Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the SOMM TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. Glad to have you here. On today's pod, I'm going to speak with a friend and one of probably, I think, one of the greatest people in the hospitality business, not just from a talent standpoint, but from an attitude standpoint. His name is Yannick Benjamin. He was, I don't even know if he knows this, but he was very strongly considered by myself and my team to be in SOMM 1. And it was like the only reason he was not in it is because he's geographically in New York. And everyone else ended up sort of in San Francisco, and the film took a turn and focused there. But Yannick was top of the list. Actually, maybe, Yannick, you do maybe know that. Do you?
I'm just finding this out right now, but wow. Good information to know.
Well, absent of SOMM 1, you starred in Uncorked, which was a series sort of based on SOMM that went on Esquire Network, and you were, no offense to anyone else that was in that show, all friends, but you were, I would say, the breakthrough. I think you and Jane Lopes were the people I think that people really connected with in that show. I don't even know where the hell people can watch it right now. I executive produced it and don't even know where you can find it.
They still have it on Amazon, actually. Amazon.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazon. Okay, good stuff. Yeah. I just want to say right now on SOMM TV, you can watch a film that we made that was a deep labor of love and very, very hard to make, due to just the sheer unknowingness of COVID. We didn't know, especially when we started the film, which was right at lockdown, actually before lockdown, with Bobby Stuckey. And this film, Saving the Restaurant, is basically 2 years of what we've all been living, but from the perspective of one of the great restaurateurs and someone who battled Congress and worked with IRC to deal with how the hell do we keep this industry that supports upwards of 30-some plus million people? And that's not even counting truckers and farmers and all of the other things. But that's from Bobby's perspective. And Yannick, I know that just really recently, you guys were forced to deal with COVID spikes again. Again, it's like this film, this thing is never ending. So you're based in New York. Tell me a little bit about kind of what it's been like for you and what the hell it's like now, because it's not over.
Well, Jason, first off, great to see you and thank you for having me on. I think this is an important conversation. The restaurant, the name Contento means happy. So, it reminds you to always stay positive during those difficult moments, but also why I chose the name Contento. It means happy both in Italian and Spanish. And certainly more than ever, we have to try to remain positive during these really difficult times. But the concept started back in early 2019. We actually had a preview tasting on December 1st, 2019 for some of our investors.
Oh, God.
And we were going to open spring of 2020. And pretty much the restaurant was built out. And if I didn't say, the restaurant's located in East Harlem on 111th Street between Park and Madison. And of course, you started hearing rumors, started watching the news. And in February, you're like, oh my God, this is not looking great. And then you're hearing mentions of how we might go under a shutdown. And you're like, this can't be true. It can't happen to us, right?
Right.
And sure enough, sometime around March 14th, March 15th, we were shut down and we could not open up the restaurant. And many other restaurants actually never opened up the doors again. And so what we took as a plan, we decided that it was best to keep the doors closed, not to open up, because if we opened up the doors after they lifted the restrictions, they might shut us down again and we would lose all that momentum. So we waited up until June 10th, 2021. That was our first official opening. So we waited well over a year, and that hurts. We still had to pay rent. We still had some overhead. We still had to pay insurance. So it's very, very challenging.
And there was nothing you could use this empty building that was this dream of you guys that you had. You found investors. You did. I think people understand the basic economy of a restaurant. I don't think I'm always talking about like the general person, which is not a real thing.
Right.
But I think people understand restaurants have a lot of moving parts. You have to pay rent. You have these things that most businesses need. But what I don't think people, unless they have worked in a restaurant in a management position, understand how thin the effing margins are.
Right.
Can you explain how razor thin? I don't even know how the hell a restaurant ever achieves profitability.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. I mean,
you're like, thanks. You're like, thanks a lot. It's really, I can't sleep at night because of this goddamn problem.
I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, the margin of error is very, it's tiny, meaning that we're one terrorist attack, one natural disaster, another pandemic away from just shutting down. And that is just how it works. Labor cost is high. Overhead, just the general overhead is quite high. There's, insurance that you've got to pay into. I mean, it just never ends and things break down constantly. And I have to redo the floor at the restaurant, for example. I mean, I can't tell you how much money was invested in that floor and we have to redo it. And the reason why we have to redo that floor was because we had a pretty bad hurricane that happened a few months ago, sometime in September, which completely destroyed the basement, but also underneath the floor. So we have to redo that. And it's very costly. So that means we also have to shut down for a couple of days. So it's just, listen, you can be in this industry for a very long time, but it's one thing to work in a restaurant, but when you actually own the actual restaurant, it's two different aspects. And there's just things that you just would never expect. And you think you're prepared, but you're simply not. And this pandemic, I don't think anybody was really prepared for.
Do you wish you could just go back? I mean, I bartended for a long time. I served for a very long time. Do you wish you could just go back to where you'd get off work at 1 a.m. and go drink in somebody's garage and hang out? Or are you happy being a manager? I mean, there's kind of a bliss. There's kind of a bliss of...
For sure. I love, what I do. I really do. I love going to work every single day. Of course, there are days where it's very challenging. Of course, there are days where I feel defeated. And I certainly felt that way at the very beginning. When we first opened in the month of June 2021, we could not get anyone to work. It was impossible. And there were a couple of reasons for it. One, many people were afraid to go back to work because of catching COVID. We still didn't really know how severe or what the ramifications were of catching COVID. Mm-hmm. People moved out of the city. And then also people were still collecting unemployment, rightfully so, deservedly so. And they weren't going to give that up to come work for a small restaurant located in East Harlem that had no kind of reputation at all during the height of the pandemic.
Right.
And so we were there. I mean, pretty much every single day, acting not as managers, but as waiters, taking orders, and doing whatever we could until finally in September of 2021, things started to get better because, now people had to go back to work because unemployment ended. And so then now finally we have a great staff, very consistent, but that took a little while. And that was certainly not easy. But God, that June, July, August, it was a nightmare. I mean, it really was. I mean,
I'm going to say this because I don't think you can. I don't think people, if you've never been served by Yannick, and Bobby Stuckey's another perfect example of this. There are people in the service industry where they were born to do this. I mean, Yannick, you are one of the most positive. This was before the pandemic. I mean, I've known you. I remember at the Penfolds house. You and I were drinking during when we were there filming SOMM 2. We were at the Penfolds house, and you and I were drinking some wine I could never afford. I don't remember what it was, and some Penfolds, old Penfolds or something. And I was just sitting there listening to you talk, and I'm sitting there. I'm kind of jaded about wine. I'm trying to make the second movie, and I'm like, I'm holding this really expensive glass of wine, and there you were. There wasn't a second of the experience, the people you were with, the wine you were drinking that you took for granted ever. And it's like, this stuff is burned in my brain now. And it's after watching you, and I really have to keep calling out Bobby, just the hospitality aspect of it. You have to love serving people. You have to love coming in and completely taking your emotions off when you walk up to that table. And it's such an incredible thing to watch people work who really love the job, really love the job. So I just have to say, it's an incredible thing to watch people do this well. It's almost like watching an Olympic athlete or something. I swear.
Well, I want to say one thing. Bobby Stuckey is a hero of mine, and I really mean that. What a gentleman, great human being. I love everything that he does, and he's been incredibly supportive since the very beginning. I've called him up whenever I see him. I ask him questions, advice. And actually, his restaurant, Frasca, he was the first person to invite me to come do a shift, a stage, work at his restaurant as a sommelier after my car accident.
Right.
And so that was my first time doing service in his restaurant, and he allowed me to serve his guests. Didn't blink an eye. And
well, we should talk about this. I mean, I don't know this. This is not something like I don't think it. I mean, obviously, it doesn't matter, but it's incredibly interesting that you're in a wheelchair. And so what you're referring to is, and I'm fascinated by the fact that this does not seem to impede you whatsoever. The service aspect, your restaurant is, I think it's become really well known for being a place that is, welcoming is a stupid word. I just mean like the accessibility of the place is built into it. It's not a thing. It's just everybody can do their job. Correct. And so when you went to Bobby Stuckey and you were after your accident, and I can't even begin to imagine the process of putting your life back together after that. But was it hard? Where did you start with like, look, I'm going back on the floor. You have to deal with obstacles you didn't know existed, probably, just physical obstacles, tables and weird places and such. How the hell did you get into that? I didn't mean to jump to this topic.
No, of course. Of course. I mean, just like you said, you have to have a passion for it. You have to live, breathe it. I mean, that's all. I mean, and that's all I think about. I mean, it drives my wife nuts sometimes. It's what I'm watching on TV.
If you're not driving your wife nuts, you're not married.
That's right.
That's my experience. I mean, I love my wife with my everything, but I drive her nuts.
For sure, I had plenty of self-doubt. Because I was born and raised in this industry. This is what I wanted to do. I didn't think of anything else. I completely devoted and dedicated myself to becoming, as Bobby Stuckey says, the best hospitalian that I could be. For sure, after my car accident, I was trying to look for work. I was sending out my resumes and I was having no luck. And people certainly, good people, but they certainly had their unconscious bias when they would see me and ask themselves, oh, well, how could he possibly work in a restaurant? Because there was no one else doing it. But I will say this, that moment of having to fly out to Boulder and work at Frasca for that evening and spending time with Bobby Stuckey was so instrumental because I was able to do it there. He made me believe that I could do it. And it was really a starting point for a very long chapter. And I'm very blessed. And that was him being who he is, and this ethos of just welcoming everybody and loving everybody and believing in them. And that's true hospitality. And he gave me this incredible platform that no one else would. And so that was really, something I never forgot. And I continue, and I try to pay it forward to others too that may have less than me or don't have that platform, because I don't know if I would be having this same conversation with you today if I didn't spend that evening at Frasca with Bobby Stuckey.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Bobby is a person that I couldn't. I honestly, I say the same thing about you. I'm gonna be frank. It's just pure generosity. I mean, if I call Bobby and I say, Bobby, I want to put you in a position like, I don't know, put cameras in your restaurant when we don't know how COVID is really transmitted yet. We were filming something with him, and then days after COVID started, essentially lockdowns, everything, and we just continued filming. We didn't intend to cover the pandemic.
Right.
But when I called him up and asked him, it was like you. He was just like, I'm terrified, but this story has to be told. And he's a consummate, to a point of obsession, professional.
Yes.
Originally the film was called The Food Runner because he just runs all the time to keep his brain straight. And I marvel at the perseverance that you guys have in the profession. And I'm sure that some of the things you've dealt with in your life and everything you've dealt with helped you deal with this pandemic, because you really were not in control. I mean, there was not a lot of. So it's a tough question, but how close are you guys getting some kind of runway right now where you're starting to feel like things are okay? Or I know you shut down again or chose to close down. How did that go? So Omicron really effed up things here.
Yeah, for sure. So we did have to close for 2 weeks from December 14th to the 28th of December, 2021.
Oh, and that's like such an important time to be open. Oh.
Exactly. It was brutal, especially for a small business, especially for a business that was already shut down for well over a year. But I will say this, Jason, the month of January has been extraordinary. People are still coming out. They're supporting. I am just overwhelmed. So far, all is well. Knock on wood. I can't complain. And December was absolutely amazing. And I will say, I'm not looking back because I'm not one of those individuals. It's like time to move forward. We cannot look back. And it was certainly beyond our control. There was nothing that we could do, but we made the right decision. We shut down to protect our employees and to protect people that were going to come to the restaurants. But I think at the end of the day, we're doing everything that we can. We're following our hearts. We're living our passion. And we have some wonderful, wonderful people that are coming to the restaurant and just showing us the love. It's unbelievable.
We should talk for a second because, I mean, obviously, I hope some of our listeners, many of them are in New York or at least that greater area. What kind of restaurant is it? Let's hype it up. Let's talk about it because people need to go. Yeah, you should have a wait. I mean, you're not the only one. My friend Dustin Wilson opened up one White Street during this whole monster of a nightmare time. And it's kind of funny. I mean, I remember talking to him. Didn't he open really similar time to you? I mean, they were building out a little bit behind. But I remember him saying to me, he was this is pre-pandemic. He was terrified about the New York Times review. It was going to what do we do? The New York Times. And then I remember just like COVID happening and that I haven't heard anything about the New York Times review. That's not the concern. The concern is you have to, it's a totally different, it's like it all shifted, kind of into. So let's talk about your restaurant. How would you classify?
Well, the restaurant is, the food is Peruvian. Mm-hmm. Our chef, Oscar Lorenzi, he's from Lima. He's been in New York for 25 years, but he's classically trained under really some great French chefs. That's also his other passion. So you'll see a lot of play on Mediterranean ingredients, French technique, but it is definitely Peruvian. The restaurant itself, listen, it's do you guys serve cuy? Oh, no, that's a big joke. Yeah, that's a big joke. Maybe one day, maybe when you come, we'll serve it.
I've eaten it many times.
Have you? Yeah, okay.
Peru. Cuy, for people who don't know, is guinea pig, and it's eaten widely in Peru. I've had it several times on there. I'm not going to lie to you; it's really delicious.
Yeah, of course.
So they do generally keep the head on, and they serve it to you, and it looks just terrified.
Exactly,
it looks very afraid to see you. And sorry for cute little guinea pigs. Anyway,
no. Of course.
When I come, I want cuy.
I'll have to talk to the chef for sure. He'll make it happen. Believe me.
I'm sure if he's a Peruvian chef, he's aware of the
great chef.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is it any kind of fusion at all, or is it straight Peruvian?
It's definitely straight Peruvian, but again, you'll see a play on French technique and the Mediterranean and all that kind of stuff. But the actual atmosphere, really, it's a collection of different experiences. A lot of small restaurants that I've been to in Europe. And there was one restaurant that I used to go to a lot with my family in Midtown Manhattan that's owned by the same guy that's from the same village as my dad in Brittany. And it's a restaurant called Tout Va Bien. And I always liked it. It was always festive. It was simple French food. But that's what I wanted I wanted it to feel like a classic bistro, everyone's a stranger, but then they get to know each other. And by the end of the night, they're all buying each other drinks and bottles of wine and great music. And that's what it really comes down to. It's an inspiration of all these great restaurants that I've ever been to. But, you have it on SOMM TV. There's one of the movies that you feature is A Table in Heaven, and it's about Ciro Macchioni. And I worked for him.
Really?
I worked for him at a very young age. And so I worked there from 18 to about 20 years old. So that had a profound effect on me. He's like my hero. And so
that's great.
I had a gentleman, Peter Elliott, who's the critic for Bloomberg. And he actually wrote the biography for Ciro Macchioni.
That's incredible.
Which was the inspiration for the actual movie. But in any case, he was like, Yannick, he was like, you are totally Ciro. You're doing the same exact things like Ciro. It's amazing. It was a nice compliment. And certainly that's what I want people to feel. That's the most important thing.
It's exciting. I mean, when there is this element, you never become the people you idolize because they are mountains, but you become something different. And then you find out, I know, I just can tell you right now, I know a ton of people look up to you. I really do. You have your persistence in taking the MS exam and your persistence in with the restaurant and your previous job. It is not even a marathon. It's an Ironman. It's like it's not a sprint, it's not a marathon. It's like whatever's way beyond that. And then by the time you get a second to stand at the top of the mountain, take a breath and look back, you realize, holy crap, look at all the stuff I've done. Or someone else has to tell you and you realize. So I'm here to tell you, you're you're on the path. You are absolutely on the path.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. I ask a lot of people. I should ask too, is it hard to get reservations for your restaurant? Because I'm coming out there filming the fourth SOMM film, grabbing a bunch of interviews and stuff. So finally I get to come. It's been so long since I've been in New York City. So I will be there, but is it hard to get in? Can I call you? Will I get in?
You'll definitely have to call me because it does book up. We're a small restaurant. So definitely resi.com. But if you have my email, you have my phone number, anyone that's listening, and of course you, Jason, just shoot me an email. We'll make it happen. I promise.
Good. It's the only reason I do this is so I can get into restaurants.
Exactly.
It's great.
Exactly.
That's great. So I ask everybody on this pod, I'm always sad because sometimes this jacks the prices up or makes it hard. But what have you had recently? Wine-wise, spirit-wise, beer-wise, I don't care. Sake, maybe it's Pisco for you. And but like, what have you had recently that people should know about? You're somebody that is like insider trading. You taste 10,000 times more interesting stuff and it's brought to you than most normal, people like me.
I'll tell you a category of wines that I'm so excited about and that I've been diving deep into, but it's really wines of the ancient world. That whole
Hell
cradle.
yes. Hell yes, man. This is so great. This is not like it's SOMM 4. I don't want to give spoilers.
Okay. You're right. That's right. I did hear about that. Yeah.
A lot of this. So feed me. What do you got?
And so just before the pandemic, I traveled to Israel and it was just so fascinating. It was just, it blew my mind. And of course I would have loved to have gone to Lebanon. I didn't get a chance to go there, but it's definitely a place that I want to go to. I mean, I've been blessed. I've traveled, but I haven't really traveled to basically that cradle of civilization where it all really began. Armenia, Georgia, Turkey, and of course, Israel and Lebanon and all that. And so that's what I'm kind of really into. I have a wine on the wine list. There's a section called Wines of the Ancient World. So we have it dedicated, and we have obviously Sicily. I have included in that section, and Greece, of course.
Makes sense.
For sure. And I think that it's an important category that we don't talk enough about. And I think to really understand the present and to understand where we're going to go in the future, we have to fully understand the past. And I think it's something that we need to emphasize. So I think it's so great that you're going to have SOMM 4 focused on this particular topic.
Oh, and so much more. As soon as we stop recording, I'm going to tell you some things I've been like, I'm jumping out of my skin to talk to somebody about. I can't I'm not allowed to talk about this film, but I can tell you, holy shit, what happens in this movie and what we filmed and the access we got is, I'm going to get in some political trouble for this movie, but it's going to be worth it because people are going to discover some really good wines and hopefully they don't get too expensive. Man, it's a wild film. Okay, so ancient wines. So where would you recommend people start? They're here in the US and you say, okay, wines of Israel. Sounds like you know most about that, or you feel most connected to the wines of Israel.
Well, I listen. Obviously, it's the one place that I went to out of the countries that I just mentioned. But I thought it was really, it was unbelievable to drive through the Judean hills and just see these crops of limestone. There's limestone all over, and we talk about limestone in Europe and how it just adds so many dimensions and layers to wines and complexity. But, they have it out there. And even though it's a very old wine producing country, there was sort of a break for a long time. And so in many ways, it kind of like, in many ways, you can kind of compare it to California. There was this break, California went through it because of prohibition and then they restarted and they had to relearn things. And that's sort of where Israel's at. And you've got all these exciting small little producers just popping up from the Golan Heights to Galilee to even in the Negev Desert. But it's a very interesting place. And even when we talk about, my gosh, Lebanon, the whole Bekaa Valley. And if you like spicy, full-bodied reds with a touch of earth and all that, there's so many wonderful producers. Of course, the one that everyone thinks of is Musar, but there's producers like Messiah and Krafaya and so on that are just killing it right now.
That break you're talking about is one of the things I find the most fascinating about these regions. Whether it's, Georgia's an interesting one because when the USSR kind of divided up all their territories and had said, look, you're going to make this and you're going to do this and Azerbaijan's going to do this and Armenia is going to make brandy. So they really did decide. But Georgia got to continue making wine, though a lot of it was junk, frankly.
Right.
It really was. So Crimea and Georgia made a lot of wine. Now, Georgia makes great wine, but a lot of the wine they were doing, especially to export to St. Petersburg and such, was bulk, basically we would call it today, and probably a lower level of bulk than we would call it today. But Georgia got to keep making wine. So you still have some of these people whose families go back many, many. But Armenia, they lost it. Yeah. And, in a lot of cases, Syria, which was an incredible winemaking center. Obviously, Iran completely lost it in 79, the revolution. And
that's right.
This stuff is something that drives me to an enormous thing because when you look at the European countries like France and Italy, and you just immediately think of cheese and wine and the feeling of it, you don't think of that with these countries that inherently invented it. It's a very strange it's just a very strange way it all turned out, you know?
It is very strange. Yeah, for sure. The more I read about it and you're like, oh my God, the influence the Phoenicians have. And you're like, my God, these grapes that we think that are French actually are Middle Eastern.
Oh, for sure. I'm so glad you included the fact that you included Southern Italy in particular, that makes a lot of sense in the ancient world. I mean, the Greeks and the Phoenicians, that was an ancient staging point for trade. And some of the oldest vines probably still cultivated in Europe are there in Sicily.
Absolutely.
Which I don't know if people know or even, generally care, but that is the truth.
100%.
Morocco, all these. I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a wine from Morocco on the list too. And, I have a wine from Turkey and I have a wine from Armenia and so on. And I'm actually going to add some wines from Cyprus. That's a country we don't talk enough about as well.
Yeah, Cyprus. I'm sure at this point, the only one listening is my mom. So hi, Mom. Cyprus goes back to time eternal, all the way back. But I mean, its involvement with, it was a Venetian holding for hundreds of years. Yes. Then it was an Ottoman one. And prior to all that, and now it is this very strange place. I mean, I think people's idea of Cyprus is like a place to launder and hide money in their banks and a financial crisis. And I don't mean to shit on Cyprus. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. But the perception of Cyprus is not, this place where the Crusaders and, the Knights Templar fought to the last man. Or, it's not, people don't think about that. They think about it as this kind of out of the way country that probably is mostly Greek, maybe. People don't know about.
Absolutely true.
And the wines there are great. What did you get from Cyprus? Do you remember what the wine is?
I didn't get them yet. I'm actually tomorrow I have a tasting group, and one of the sales reps is going to come by and taste us in a couple of SOMMs and some wines. So see what they have to offer and check out the quality, and we're excited,
This is so great that after so many years in the profession, you're still a young man, but what are you 65 now?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, how you feel? You look young. So that you've been in this for so long and you still are looking for these new,
oh my gosh, yes,
or new/old, but new wines. And I think it's I just am surprised when so many people that have been in the industry are like acting like they just discovered Spain. And you're like,
oh my God,
it's like Ribera Sacra has been around for a long time.
Yes,
there's way new stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know. Anyways.
And making wines in the Canary Islands. They've been doing it for a while too, So
I know that's true. Everybody, you remember that phase? Everyone was like, "Oh my God, Canary Island wines!" Yeah. And they are absolutely ridiculously good. But it's kind of like these have been here for a long time. I don't understand why people just the wine.
Well, I think to be in this industry and to prevent yourself from getting jaded and complacent, you have to remain curious. It's an industry and especially the wine industry, it's infinite. It just doesn't end, but it only ends if you allow it to. I mean, just even like a small little island like Cyprus. I mean, just the history and come on. I never want to hear someone tell me like, oh, I'm bored by wine.
Yeah, it's impossible. And that's the other thing too. Sometimes when I make these films and these projects, it doesn't happen anymore because I'm able to make stuff at a volume that keeps me infinitely crazy busy in a fun way.
That's awesome.
When I was making, the second SOMM film, there was this thing of like, I don't want to make another wine film. And I made the third one. And now it's like, I'm thinking maybe I'll make a fifth SOMM film about the Nazis and everything that happened in France. Yeah. And it's like, you literally can't stop. There is no end to where you can go. And I honestly have to say thank you to you and a lot of your cohorts for giving me the ability to do this stuff. It's freaking awesome. I love it. It's good stuff.
Well, thank you for everything that you do. Gosh.
Yeah. Well, I just drink all day. That's pretty much what I do. And again, sorry, Mom. You raised me right. Well, one more time, plug your restaurant.
Contento Restaurant. You can find this on Instagram at Contento NYC or go on our website, contentonyc.com.
Excellent. And they deliver nationwide as well. So
that's right. One day.
One day. That's right. All right. Well, you, my friend, we're going to talk again very soon. And I may have to find a way to complicate the hell out of your life coming up now that I know you're into ancient wine. So, all right. We'll talk again very soon, Yannick.
Thank you for everything. Really, it was such a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the SOMM TV podcast. Please don't go run up the price on ancient wines right now. This is, I have a lot more drinking to do, and I'd like to be able to afford these incredible things. Please go to sommtv.com and watch Saving the Restaurant. This is a movie that is, you'll enjoy it. It's a great story, and Bobby's an incredibly charismatic person, but it's one of the most important issues facing not just the service industry, but also a huge percentage of jobs in America and Canada and Europe and so on and so on. So watch the film and hopefully it motivates you to go out and treat people well and give them a nice tip. All right, I will talk to you all very soon. Be safe, and thanks for listening, Mom.